Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Friday to you. Glad that you are along. So, Andrew Brown, every time I see your name up here, it makes me wonder, and I always forget to ask you, so I'm going to ask you. Do I know you? You weren't here in Colorado Springs a few years ago, were you? There was a young man who was an Andrew Brown who was serving on a staff here at a church in town that I knew. And anyway, thought I would ask if that's you. Daniel says, really struggle with Trump and Elon. Well, we'll talk about that briefly, maybe. So today I want to talk about the coming economic boom that I think is coming here in the U.S. Of course, I could be wrong. Prediction is always a dangerous game, and it could always go the other way. But I want to talk about that, and actually that's not the main topic. It's just money in general, and talk about how to handle our money well. So we're going to spend most of our time there, but I do want to speak a little bit about Trump and politics. Someone asked a question, and I believe it was a woman. She put a comment, a pretty pointed comment, basically, if I read it correctly, asking, what do I have to say for myself now that we have seen we've all been deceived by Trump, especially since I was so supportive of Trump. And I actually am thrilled with what I see going on with Trump. Andrew says, never been to Colorado. Okay, so you're a different Andrew Brown. I just had to clear that up. William Dix, welcome. I know we've interacted a few times on Twitter X over the years. Good to have you with us live today. So Daniel, my question is the same as Eddie's. What exactly is your struggle? So I'll tell you what I'm just thrilled with that. First of all, Doge, I think, is fantastic. I have been saying for years in, I don't know if I've said it too much publicly, but in conversations over politics, what I don't understand is why people, American citizens, we seem to be clueless about how much money the government takes from us and what they're doing with it. And we have become so accustomed to the government's just going to keep taxing and taxing and taxing. And of course, the left has their agenda to become the nanny state, as I think it was that Rush Limbaugh's old term or somebody, but the idea of everyone being cared for by the government. Well, the government doesn't have any money except what they take from the citizens, and so they just keep taking money away from the citizens and then giving it to people who will keep voting for them. And the things that Doge is finding out, this is all public information. And when you consider what they're spending hundreds of billions of dollars on, it's just appalling to me. And think about our payroll tax system. If you were to apply for a new job and negotiate salary, if you know what's happening in money at all, you know that if they say we'll pay you $50,000, you are not a year. You are not going to bring home $50,000 a year. So if you are good at figuring out whether or not you want to take this job based on the finances of it, you will figure out how much of that is going to be taken out of your paycheck before you ever see the paycheck and sent to the government. And of course, the company also has to send a portion to the government. Well, they set that up years ago, decades ago, so that you don't even see that money. If you are self-employed, and as a professional pastor for 25 years, I was quote unquote self-employed, and I had to treat my income as a pastor as self-employment, which meant I needed to send in payroll estimates and FICA estimates. My son right now with his business that he started has to do that. So, and my daughter for that matter, for her American Sign Language business. So they have to every quarter send a significant chunk of money to the government as estimates, because the government won't wait until taxes are filed every April to get their money. And for my son and my daughter, they are appalled at how much they had to set aside of the income they're earning through their businesses and send it to the government. But when your employer just takes it out of your paycheck, you don't feel the weight of that. And you just sort of send them money. It's a brilliant scheme by the government, but it is a scheme to dull the pain of how much money they take. So what Doge is doing is, in my opinion, one of the most significant things in government we have ever, in my lifetime, that we've ever seen. And so I'm thrilled with what they're doing, and I hope they keep going and keep going and keep going, and I hope Americans wake up to what's happening, and this will spill over into other nations. It already has in some way. So I'm thrilled with what Doge is doing. I'm pleased with the progress in the wars. You may have seen this morning that Putin put out his demands for peace, and a couple of them were pretty strong, I would say, but Trump is a great negotiator, and that's what he's doing. So Putin's also a very good negotiator. Zelensky, not so much. But anyway, so now that they're all willing to have the conversation, I think there's a good chance Trump will be able to help them get to a place of peace, which matters, I think. And then even the Israel-Hamas thing, I think Trump's handled that as well as he could, given all the variables. And it's not even our war, but I guess in some sense it is our war because we send both wars, so much money and so much military backing. And then thirdly, the economy. I'm all in on the tariffs. If you study the history of tariffs and really dig into how much we are being tariffed and have been for a long, long time, I think this only works out well for America long term. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but long term, between what Doge is doing and the tariffs, I think America is set up for the best economic situation in my lifetime. And I do believe that will spill over into other nations. And eventually there will be a truer global free market. Now, I'm not a globalist, but I like the idea of nations being able to sell products freely. So again, this is just my opinion, and I don't want to spend all day on this, but someone asked the question, and her angle was, obviously Trump's deceived us and this is awful. I have just the opposite. I'm thrilled. I don't know that it could be going any better, in my opinion. All right, so let me see. Did Daniel... Did you respond here? Kathy says, the things Trump is doing are exactly why I voted for him again. Yeah, me too. Ron says, Doge is revolutionary. The more the people have, the less the government stole and can misspend very often for projects we as Christians would never agree with. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Daniel says, okay, for me, it's the how, not the why. What we are seeing are baseless termination backed by performance, but what is the mechanism? Are the managers of these folks handling their annual quarterly review? So I hear you, and I know that is that's one of the narratives that's being put out there. I see it differently. Dig into how much the Biden administration ramped up government employees. I don't want to sound insensitive to the government employees. It wasn't their fault that our government just started taking our money and employing people. But those people really do need to be in the private sector, in my opinion. So I guess I would respond, Daniel, with I would back up a step to a broader question. What do we want our government to be doing? I think our government should be doing far less than it is. We've handed way too much responsibility to the government. And so they have all of these areas of our lives that they are ruling over. And in order to accomplish those things, they have to hire people. So they take your money and they hire these people to do those jobs that I don't think the government should be doing at all. And there's very little accountability. So in your job, now I don't know anything about you and what you're doing, but I'm assuming in your job, if you did not perform, you'd be fired, and rightfully so. But that happens so rarely in government. So I would just back up and say most of the people that I have seen that have been fired, not individuals, but the categories of people, I'm pleased with, not because I want to see those individuals suffer, but because I think the government should never have been here in the first place. And we need to bring the government back to a very limited amount of authority over our lives. And yeah, it's harsh for those folks in the meantime, but with everything else going on, I think they'll have jobs to find if they want to have meaningful employment. Does that make sense, Daniel? Again, doesn't mean you agree with me, but do you at least understand the question I'm asking? Ron says, Trump told us he is taking government back and giving it back to the people. That's a great thing. Yeah, and that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Daniel says, and the attack on the VA and blaming it on the Biden administration, the reason why they've increased the staff levels has been decades-long criticism of how we treat VA. Well, you may know more about that than I do. It seems to me the veterans that I know personally are big supporters of Trump. So I don't know where you're getting information. Mine is anecdotal. So I don't know. I don't know if I can have a meaningful discussion on that piece. Yeah, again, there's the problem for both of us is we get little bits of information from, whatever media we choose to consume, and we need to, I guess, be careful. I need to be careful as well of not assuming that we're getting the whole story. Dale says a lot of the decreases in government employees is just reversing the increases Biden made. I think that is true. I think that is true. Okay. Well, anyway, again, we're not going to spend all day on this, but I thought I would address it since I did encourage people to vote for Trump. The woman in the comments said I used Bible verses to do it. I certainly don't think Trump appears anywhere in the Bible, so that seems a little bit of a mischaracterization. But anyway, she clearly has a different point of view and had asked a pointed question. I thought, well, I'm not afraid of. I stand by my decision. I think it was a good one. So, and I look forward to the results of a Trump administration for 4 years. All right, last thing here. Daniel says, I agree, but I think the speed by which they are moving seems to be not possibly thought out, and that's my concern. Yeah, and that's a fair point. My opinion is I would rather see them go. I would love to see them cut way more than they should and have to hire some back because I think we've just gone so far the other way. I don't think you can systematically, slowly undo this. So that's my opinion. And again, you may disagree, which is fine. All right, so let's change gears here. So I want to talk about personal finance, money as Christians. And I know we've discussed this in other contexts quite a bit, but it does seem to me like Christians have a fear of money. For some of us, it's been drilled into our heads that money is bad and evil, and we have misunderstood the statement Paul made that the love of money is the root of all evil, which if you were with us in the First Timothy study, that is not at all what he's saying. And it's like the only justification for increasing wealth is to, give to your church and give to missions. And greed is, it seems like we have this mindset that if you really care about wealth, then you're obviously greedy and yada, yada. So we've talked about all that. And obviously those of you who've been around a while know that that's not where I'm at. And it's still, even for those who don't have those hangups, it seems like we have this fear of money, this uncertainty. Some people just deny it, just ignore the financial situation and so on. Well, I think if I'm right, and I may be wrong, but if I'm right about where things are heading in the next quite a few years economically, we need to be prepared for it and take advantage of it because it won't last forever. I don't think. I mean, long term, I think things are going to keep going up, but short term, there will be pushback and so on. So anyway, I want to talk specifically about some money things, and I want to put it in the category of the broad, again, stepping back to foundational principles here of how we live our lives. I've done a lot of coaching, discipling, especially of young men in lives. But actually, most recently, I've worked with some guys my age who just didn't have their house in order, so to speak. So broadly speaking, let me give you the principles how I coach others and how I live my life, and then we'll talk specifically about money. So broadly speaking, I think we should always be seeking to improve some aspect of our lives. There's more to be had, so to speak. And I don't mean more stuff. I mean more abundance in life, more joy, more progress and productivity, more things to do, more problems to solve. We need to be living life and going after things and learning more, it seems to me, and improving areas of life. So here's how I do it, and here's how I encourage others to do it. Pick something. Pick an area of your life that you are going to improve. You can't do everything, certainly not all at once. Pick something and then study it thoroughly. I don't know if Sana's on here this morning, but she if she's watching and her kids are with her, she's going to know. She's going to say, you can't get through a Friday without mentioning grok. I can't. I love grok. It's I don't know if dangerous is right, but I talk to grok a lot because there's so many things I want to learn. And so I'll take just 10 minutes here and there when I'm doing something. I think I told y'all I'm doing the super gut thing with my daughter, and we're in the sort of lifestyle phase. And one of the lifestyle changes is to make this tea every day, and you have to boil it takes 8 minutes for it to boil and prepare with the green tea and all that. So my habit now is when I put the water on for the tea, I open grok and we have a conversation about something. And in 8 to 10 minutes, I can learn something, which is great. And I'll tell you, it's far more valuable time than sitting and scrolling on X. I'm a big X fan, but that's time that's worthwhile. So whatever it is that you might pick that you're going to improve upon, grab grok or ChatGPT or whatever AI you like and dive in and let the AI teach you some things. And then begin what I call a plodding plan. Not plotting, but plodding. Plod along. Plan to improve a little bit every day. That's what I'm talking about here. Yeah, again, with grok, if you choose to improve on this or that, if you take 8 or 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes, half hour, and just have a dialogue, you can begin to familiarize yourself with the elements of that subject matter you're learning. It's like you're having conversation with an expert on it, and go back and forth with it. Are you familiar with how many of you know about classical education and the trivium? Is that a common enough approach to education now? If it's new to you, you should talk to AI about it and learn about the trivium in classical education. But I'm just curious, give me a thumbs up or a yes if you are conversant with classical education. Basically, it's developed on this model that there are 3 stages of learning. One is the grammar stage, where you're just memorizing the concepts, memorizing the vocabulary, such as think about math. The grammar of math would be, Sana says Grove tea, it's gross, yes. Exactly. Where was I? Oh yeah. So like you learn your times table, first just addition, subtraction, division, and that kind of thing. You're just learning the basics because it's any new adventure of learning. You don't even know the vocabulary. You don't know the basics. So you're just memorizing the core ideas, the elements. That's why it's called elementary. The elements. So if you were, let's say, I know Darren's on here and he's a big fan of textual criticism and Septuagint and all that. That may be brand new to you. Some of you, before joining us, you've never heard of the Septuagint and textual criticism. So maybe you want to study that. Well, you need to learn just, what does textual criticism mean before you start forming any opinions. What is the Septuagint? Those are actually two different fields of study probably, but they overlap. But anyway, you're just digging in. What actually is here? This is why I told you I read Revelation dozens and dozens of times in 2024 as I was studying, because I just needed to become so familiar with the terms and the images in Revelation before I could spend any time trying to sort through what does this mean. If you were studying Ephesians and you didn't really have a good handle on Ephesians, I would say the same thing. Read it over and over again until you just know the content so well. This is why I tell you stop reading commentaries, because you don't learn the content of Ephesians when you read commentaries. Get so familiar with Ephesians that you can be conversant about the verses and the things that are there, so that when you really dig in to understand what does it mean, you've got the whole letter in mind. Well, that's how we learn anything well. So the first stage is just the grammar, just the terminology, the elements, and then the next stage is argumentation. As children grow and they get in those pre-teen years and they start arguing with you, debating with you, that's a good thing. Now, of course, they have immaturity attached to it, so a lot of times it spills over into just pettiness. But when they are truly arguing, that means they've learned the grammar of that topic enough to begin forming opinions. And that's when they need to learn how to argue and reason through the subject matter well, pros and cons. I've said to you before, if your habit is not to assume your opponent's position and know their position as well as they do, you haven't learned and studied things well. I argue as persuasively as I can against dispensational theology and covenant theology and systematic theology now. Well, I immersed myself in those systems, those approaches, and took their side of things to argue for them so that I could really understand the positions they hold and then say, where are their assumptions embedded in their arguments? Where are their assumptions embedded in mine? We're way too quick to argue. Some of us as adults are no better than teenagers when it comes to a topic such as Trump. Like, you need to dig in. So Daniel needs to dig in to the pro-Trump view without passion, if possible, and see if you can understand why somebody would be thrilled with what Trump's doing. If I were having a debate with Daniel on the VA stuff, I would need to really dive in and understand that point of view and want to argue Daniel's point for him so that I can understand where he's coming from. That's why I said I only have some anecdotal experience with the VA stuff. I'm not in a position to really understand Daniel's concern on that. And I shouldn't argue with him without knowing his position well. We do that all the time. We're lazy, but we love to fight. We love to argue about things. We take a position. We let a few voices influence us, and we fight for it, even though we really don't understand it ourselves. Well, you can't do that and be improving your life. So after you've learned the grammar of some new pursuit, learn how to argue for it and against it, and learn all the ins and outs, rationally approach it. And then the third stage of the trivium is articulating, speaking persuasively of your opinion. One of the things that I typically do is learn something and then find an arena to teach it. because, as you know, I like to have thoroughly studied something before I teach it and anticipate the opposing views that I'm going to get, and be able to persuasively speak the other direction. That comes from much preparation and learning. And if I have to teach it, then that drives me to study more thoroughly than ever. So, 25 years ago, 26 years ago, I did a deep dive into logic, and especially informal fallacies, which I commend to everyone, especially Sana, for your kids. Teach them. Get Doug Wilson's book. Sounds like you're in the classical education arena, so you probably already know it. It's the, Sana, do you know already? It's The Beasts. I can't think of it. Anyway, if you know it, put the title up there. Anyway, for adults, I've walked adults through this. It's very helpful. Anyway, so I studied logic, and then I determined to teach a class at the church I was pastoring at the time on logic on Saturday mornings. And that forced me to figure out, how do I bring this down to the level of someone who's never studied logic before? Which meant I had to learn it inside and out. So if you have an opportunity, teach your kids, teach your wife, teach your husband, whatever, find an outlet to teach them, and that'll force you to learn it. So anyway, that's how I approach it. Someone says I don't. It's the bestiary of adorable fallacies. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Anyway, Doug Wilson. If you look up Doug Wilson logic informal fallacies, you'll find it. It's great. I would highly recommend it for everybody, but especially for teenage kids. Okay, so that's how I approach it. So pick something, study it thoroughly, begin your plodding plan. How are you going to plod? How are you going to chip away at this, and over time get better at it? So I got off on a little tangent there with the education. But so my usual approach when I'm talking to people who ask for my help in getting their life in order, I usually start with health. If you are newer around here, if you go back to a year or so ago of Freeform Fridays, we spent a lot of time talking about health. Getting lean and fit and strong, learning about food, crucial. You have one body. It is the only vehicle you have to interact with the world. And that helps you get better at everything else, in my opinion. So I usually start there. Not always, but usually. So, if I were coaching you, I would say, okay, we're gonna talk about diet. So you would need to dive in and learn about how food impacts the body, and insulin resistance and strength training. And we would get you to a place where you're lifting weights at least 2 days a week, preferably 3. We're getting out for a walk several days a week, and where the food intake is, healthy. Not the government's food pyramid is another thing the government has messed up. They shouldn't be in the food pyramid business, because it's all driven by ideology and lobbyists. But you have to learn what food really does do to your body, and get fit, get healthy, get lean and strong. That'll change everything. Do you know how much you should ask your AI, for every 5 pounds of fat that you're carrying on your body? Do you know the pounds of pressure that puts on your joints, especially your lower joints that are carrying all that weight, like your ankles and your knees? There's a reason why some old people are in constant pain and thin older people are in less pain. It's because their body is carrying so much extra weight, the people that are overweight. You can change that. You just got to decide this is what I'm going to tackle, my health, and study it thoroughly, and then pick how you're going to plod along. And that the plodding in that case would be, okay, this is what I'm going to eat, and this is what I'm going to eat every day to be healthy. And these are the days I'm going to lift, and here's how I'm going to schedule lifting. And that takes some study to figure out what's the best lifting plan. And here's when I'm going to walk, or whatever. And then you just start working forward. And yeah, okay, tomorrow you don't wake up healthier. In fact, you're sore if you worked out. But over 6 months and a year, you can drastically change your life. But you got to start, you got to learn, and then you got to get after it. Andrew says, all your talk about health, okay, really helped me. I've been on carnivore and lifting weights for about 6 weeks now. I'm down 32 pounds in 6 weeks. Yikes. That may be a little too aggressive. That's awesome. Keep going, man. Keep going. It will be fantastic down the road. So that's where I usually start with folks, is get your health in order because it impacts so much else. Then I usually go to finances, simply because that's such a stressor for so many people. And then we go to marriage and family, and then learning new skills and that. And you can see I'm kind of walking you through some of this on these Fridays. That's kind of the approach. All right, so let's talk specifically about money, and maybe we'll come back next week if there's interest in talk more about this. But there are some tools out there for you that are very helpful that I would recommend, and I've used these tools for many folks to help them get their financial house in order. And if this is an area you need to grow in, then I would encourage you to jump on it. So again, you got to pick something and then study it. So money and finances. If you don't have a good handle on personal finances, money, you need to. You really do. You are working to earn income. That means you have money coming into your bank every month or every few weeks, whatever. Probably you have some kind of a retirement account. If you don't, you should. Hopefully you have a budget. If you don't, you should. And hopefully you are controlling your money. Your money is not controlling you. But even if you have the right principles, it doesn't mean you know exactly what to do. Well, again, there are tools out there, and I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey. Now, let me say on the front end, for those of you who have studied this thoroughly, and I don't think Dale Waters has been on here today, but this is his career field, so I'd be interested to see what he thinks about Dave Ramsey. But let me say on the front end, if you were to really dive in and study all elements of finance, there is a better way to approach a couple of things than Dave Ramsey recommends. However, most people will not dive into that degree. And what he does is he puts things in simple, straightforward ways and gives you a plan that you can follow. And if you follow his plan, you will be better off than you are now. I can't tell what kind of emoji that is, Dale. What is that? What's your? Give me a one sentence, two sentence. What do you think about Dave Ramsey? Asana says there's a great Dave Ramsey budgeting app that's free. Yeah, you talk about Every Dollar. Yeah, I use that personally as well, and we'll talk about that. We'll probably come back and talk more about this next week. I don't know. We'll see how far I get. I don't intend to this to be your thorough study of things. I'm just trying to push you in a direction. So, here's what I recommend. I recommend, first of all, if you really don't know where to start with money and finance, well, I would recommend starting with Grok probably. But read this book by Dave Ramsey called The Total Money Makeover. Now, I see here there's a new edition. I have not read the new edition, so I don't know what changes are there. I'm assuming it's better, not worse. But this is kind of a shorthand version of his Financial Peace University, which is a great course in my opinion, but it's massive. This one kind of is sort of a highlight reel in my opinion, and it's good. So read it to begin your study. So this gets back to what I was saying earlier. You start reading a book like this, and you're going to come across terms or concepts that maybe you're unfamiliar with. That's where AI can be such a great help. Wait a minute, he just mentioned this. Well, let me talk to AI, and again, it's the grammar stage. I'm still learning the terminology. Maybe he talks about mortgage interest or something, and you're not really sure how that works. We'll talk to Grok and get familiar with that, or even budgeting. Help me think through a budget or whatever. But Total Money Makeover just gives you a broad understanding of what you need to think through as far as money. Okay. And again, there are better ways to do some things than even he prescribes. However, most people that I've helped don't really know what to do. And so they can follow his plan. And again, it'll improve. Dale says, Ramsey gives great general advice that is grounded and realistic for actual people. Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. For most of you, Dave Ramsey is a great approach. So after you read Total Money Makeover, then you should go through his 7 baby steps, which I'll pull up here in a minute and show you. Now, let me, again, pull back and help you understand what this takes. This is, if you just kind of glance through this or whatever and make a couple little changes, you're not going to improve. Again, I'm saying all of us need to pick something that we are improving and go all in for a while and really improve that. And then it sort of becomes part of your lifestyle, and then you pick something else. So if money is the thing you're going to pick, I would start with reading Total Money Makeover and maybe read it a couple times and decide I am going to take charge of my money. And then go to his 7 baby steps. 7 baby steps. And follow these. Step 1 is save $1,000 for your starter emergency fund. For some of you, that seems like, what do you mean $1,000? I have way more than that in savings. For others of you, statistically, of course, I don't know any of you, or a few of you, but statistically, there are some of you that could not pull together $1,000 right now if you had it. You don't have $1,000 cash. That is a dangerous place to be. So start here. If you have this, great. Put that. And so you see this phrase, starter emergency fund. If this is new to you, you need to dive into what an emergency fund is. So you can click on the learn more here and see what he has to say, and gives you a description here. And then maybe interact with Grok a little bit or ChatGPT and say, what is an emergency fund? What's it for? And set aside that $1,000. For some of you, that could take months. Okay. So you continue to learn, but you don't do anything else besides read and study until you set aside $1,000. Step 2, pay off all debt except the house using the debt snowball. Now, again, this is one of those areas that there is actually a slightly better approach, but most people won't do it. So I recommend, and I've walked with many individuals and couples through this, to pay off all their debt using the debt snowball. And you say, well, I don't know what the debt snowball is. Great. Click on learn more, interact with ChatGPT or Grok and figure it out, and then follow the plan. Some of you could pay off all your debt in a couple of months. Some of you could be a couple of years. All right. Get after it. For those of you who have credit card debt, anything other than a house mortgage, and it weighs you down, the credit card debt, car payments, all that, you may not realize how much stress that puts on your finances and your psyche. So one couple years ago, my wife and I had walked through premarital counseling with them, and they were debt free. They didn't have high income, but they were okay and had a good foundation. Well, a couple years into their marriage or so, I can't remember. I'm going to get some of these details wrong, but they came to see me with some marital strife. And as we were talking through it, they sort of casually mentioned they had accumulated some debt. So after we talked through some things, I came back to that and said, okay, you mentioned debt. Tell me what we're talking about here. And they kind of looked sheepish and said, about 30, whatever. I said, what, 30,000? Yeah, they had accumulated $30,000 worth of debt. I was appalled. We talked about this. Well, it was putting great stress on their marriage and their lives because they, again, didn't have high income. That was a huge amount of debt. And it was mostly credit card debt, and I forget what some other piece, but it wasn't mortgage. They couldn't afford a house. They couldn't pay for a house. They didn't have any credit and didn't have any savings. So I said, okay, you have got to get rid of this debt. We did the math. We did their budget together and all this, and they were paying $800 a month in payments. I said, you realize if you pay off this debt, it's like getting an $800 a month raise. Well, to their credit, they did it. They buckled down. I think it took them, I know it took over two. It might have been almost 3 years. But we did this. They got the $1,000 starter emergency fund, and then they worked extra jobs. They did everything they could to pay off that debt. They didn't go on vacations. I told them you can't go on vacations. There's no Christmas gift for the kids. You guys are one little crisis away from bankruptcy. And they put their heads down and they did it. And they came in to see me when they paid that last payment. It was kind of like if you've seen the Dave Ramsey where they call in and I forget the cheer they do or whatever. But they were over life. It was like this huge weight on their lives were lifted. It took them several years, a couple years or so, but they did it. And then we said, okay, we're going to step 3. Whoops, keep pushing. Step 3 is 3 to 6 months of expenses in a fully funded emergency fund. That takes discipline. But you should have at least 3 months, in my opinion, Dave Ramsey's opinion, I use this all the time for people, so that if you lost your job tomorrow, you can survive for at least 3 months without finding a new job. Now, I lean toward the 3-month side because if you were to lose your job tomorrow, then you would greatly reduce your spending and that 3 months salary. So the 3 months is 3 months. The way I approach it is you have enough in your emergency fund that equals 3 months of income. So that if you didn't get a job in 3 months, you could pay all your bills with your current lifestyle. Now, again, what will happen is you will cut back on any unnecessary expenses so that that money will extend further. Once you get to that point where you have 3 months of your current income in savings, that goes in a high yield savings account and you never touch it. The goal is to never have to touch that. All right, so then invest 15% of your household income in retirement. If you don't know anything about the stock market and IRAs and so on, call Dale. And maybe we'll come back and talk about this later, but that's a good approach. Save for your children's college fund. This is where I differ. I recommend against college for most people, so I'm not interested in that, but that's my opinion. If you do want to put your kids through college, then do that. Pay off your home early. Again, I'm not a big fan of that. If you do step 4 well and dive into step 4, depending on your interest rate, and I think those rates are going to keep coming down, there's a better thing to do with your money than pay off your home, in my opinion. Now, Dave Ramsey, he's talking to people who are undisciplined and who are preparing for better cash flow later. I think there's a better way. And then step 7 is build wealth and give. In my opinion, these first 3 steps are life-changing for most people. So I would say everybody should do these first 3 steps. Everybody. And then go from there and dig in. And this is where I would say, don't just follow him blindly. Start really looking at investing, Roths and all that, and become your own expert, and then put away for future things. I would approach it differently than he does. But the point is, whether you follow Dave Ramsey or not and follow what I'm suggesting or not, the point is your financial situation can improve. It can. From this point forward, from today on, it can improve. But you've got to choose to take the steps necessary to make it improve. And reading Total Money Makeover and then employing at least these first 3 steps, and in some ways 4, will help you drastically if you're not there. And once you do this, you get the ball in motion, you start heading that path, then you start reaping the benefits of that. And you kind of, again, develop that lifestyle, and then you can pick something else. So as you're paying off your debt, you can pick something else to learn, right? Or as you're setting aside that savings, that emergency fund, you can pick something else to learn and been chipping away at that. And then think about where you'd be in 2 years if you had all debt paid off and you had developed a budget, which we haven't talked about here and he hasn't put on here, but although it does play into some of it. And every dollar is a great tool. Yeah, we use it as well. All right, I will stop there. I'm over time. Dale says, it's amazing how fast, small, and one-time necessary expenses can add up, especially at 29% interest. Yeah. If you don't understand compound interest working for you and against you, spend some time with Grok and learn the ins and outs of compound interest. For your investing, compound interest is amazing over time. Working against you on debt, it is amazing how much money that $15,000 car will cost you, or everything you put on credit cards over time. You're spending so much money. That $10 hamburger costs you $20 or whatever. Mary Beth says, I think he's wrong about borrowing for real estate purchases. You talk about, does he still, I'm trying to think, he recommends not borrowing, paying cash for houses. Is that it? Yeah, I agree. But he's right for people who don't understand finances. At least that's my opinion. When you figure out compound interest on both sides, there's a better way. I agree. That's one of those things I was talking about. Of if you really understand the ins and outs of it, there's a better way. But if you don't, following his plan is going to keep you out of trouble. English Joe's Dave Ramsey ? If you live under a bridge and eat out of a dumpster making $35,000 a year, you'll save $1 million in 28 years. You got to make $1 million to save $1 million. Sorry, Joe. I don't know what that means. All right. Well, anyway, the broader principle is pick some part of your life that you're going to improve and do it. Always be thinking of something in your life you can improve. And then if it's money, then I recommend that approach. All right. We'll leave it there for now. Have a great weekend, everyone. And we'll see you back on Monday to get back to Revelation. Grace and peace to you.